House Democrats now poised to issue a blunt ultimatum to Vice President Pence tomorrow, invoke the 25th Amendment to remove President Trump by Wednesday, or they'll make the president the first ever to be impeached twice.
I think every day he's in office, he remains a real and present danger to the country.
Pence, seen late today arriving at the White House, is said to oppose implementing the 25th Amendment. So Democrats today introducing a single article of impeachment, accusing President Trump of, quote, inciting violence against the government of the United States. The charge right now reads in part, President Trump gravely endangered the security of the United States and its institutions of government. He therefore betrayed his trust as president.
We have to stand up to this man who incited a violent riot at our nation's capital. It was a massive humiliation to our nation. It had a lot of people die.
Already more than 210 House Democrats back impeachment, but there's no broad support among Republicans.
All right, everyone. John here. Let's get into it. House Democrats just filed formal articles of impeachment. Unannounced, no warning, straight onto the official congressional record, accusing Trump of inciting threatened genocide. It all traces back to one Easter Sunday post where Trump declared, "A whole civilization will die tonight over the Strait of Hormuz." Over 80 Democrats are now backing impeachment or the 25th Amendment specifically over that post.
In the Senate, Democrats would need 17 Republicans to join them to convict and remove the president. But so far, only one frequent Trump critic, Ben Sasse, says he would consider impeachment. Two others say President Trump should step down.
Well, I think the best way for our country, Chuck, is for the president to resign and go away as soon as possible.
Many Republicans warn a partisan impeachment would further divide Americans.
The Democrats are going to try to remove the president from office just 7 days before he's set to leave anyway. I do not see how that unifies the country.
President Trump out of sight again today, but in the wake of last week's riots, the PGA announced its canceled plans to hold the 2022 PGA Championship at President Trump's Bedminster, New Jersey Golf Club. First Lady Melania Trump breaking her silence, expressing her condolences to the families of those who died and calling for calm. Our nation must heal in a civil manner, she writes. Violence is never acceptable. A potential Senate trial to remove President Trump would likely happen after he's already gone from office. But President-elect Biden tonight insists it would not interrupt his first 100 days.
Can you go half day on dealing with the impeachment and half day getting my people nominated and confirmed in the Senate? So that's my hope and expectation.
Trump's response was to dismiss it and refuse to walk back a single word. The articles are filed, numbered, and permanent. This is no longer theoretical. For the duration of this second term, Democrats have been building a record. They've documented grievances. They've held floor votes that forced members to show their cards. But most of these efforts were telegraphed. They were anticipated. They became part of the expected rhythm of opposition from a minority party.
And late tonight, Acting Homeland Security Secretary Chad Wolf abruptly announced that he is stepping down, but Wolf did not cite last week's riots in his resignation message. Lester.
All right, Peter, thank you. And that leads us to our Capitol Hill correspondent, Casey Hunt. Casey, any indication if Republicans will join Democrats in pushing for impeachment?
Lester, late tonight on a conference call, top House Republican Kevin McCarthy said for the first time that President Trump does bear some responsibility for the Capitol riot and didn't rule out censuring the president. But so far, one Republican congressman has said publicly he's thinking about going further and voting for impeachment. If others join him, that could lead to more support for convicting President Trump in the Senate, where behind the scenes, Republicans are even more furious after new video showed just how much danger they were in.
The administration had grown adept at absorbing these blows, at labeling them routine or the same old witch hunt. But what just happened with the Iran impeachment articles is different in a very specific and very dangerous way for this White House. It was a surprise attack. It landed without the courtesy of a schedule. It materialized in the immediate smoking aftermath of a social media post whose specific phrasing, "a whole civilization will die tonight," crossed a threshold that previous provocations, however ugly, had never quite reached. And it landed with a charge that is not merely political hyperbole, genocide. That word, placed into a formal congressional filing, carries a weight that abuse of power or obstruction simply cannot match. Genocide is not a vague political insult. It has a specific, devastating legal definition under international law. The Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide defines it as acts committed with the intent to destroy, in whole or in part, a national, ethnic, racial, or religious group. When members of the House of Representatives file articles accusing the president of inciting or threatening genocide, they are employing the most serious legal characterization available in the human lexicon. They are not saying he was mean or undiplomatic. They are saying his language met the legal threshold for threatening one of the gravest crimes recognized by civilized nations. That is not routine opposition politics. That is a formal legislative indictment that the president's rhetoric aligned with the definition of a crime against humanity. And the dam-breaking analysis coming from outlets like Axios is not just convenient media narrative. It describes a real, tangible shift in the political physics of Capitol Hill. Throughout this second term, there has been a consistent, frustrating loop for the progressive wing of the Democratic Party. Trump would do something alarming, the base would erupt, leadership would respond with a letter, a hearing, or perhaps a resolution. But the cold, hard math of the Republican-controlled House always served as a wet blanket. The leadership's calculation was consistently cautious. A failed impeachment vote is a gift to Trump. It lets him claim exoneration and rally his base. Why hand him that victory when the numbers in the Senate make conviction a fantasy? This caution created a constant, grinding tension between the activist wing of the caucus and the strategic leadership. The Iran Post seems to have snapped that tension like a dry twig. The language was so extreme, so viscerally evocative of nuclear annihilation and ethnic cleansing, that the political cost of doing nothing finally eclipsed the political cost of a symbolic loss. The base is no longer asking, it's demanding. 80-plus members are on the record. The phones in every congressional office are melting down with constituent fury, and the specific charge of threatened genocide provides a moral and legal grounding that is exponentially harder to dismiss as partisan games than a debate over the nuances of the war powers resolution. And let's examine Trump's counterpunch, because it reveals more about his cornered state of mind than he likely intends. His response was to call the articles ridiculous, and to claim that Democrats are actively trying to help Iran. He then refused to offer even a whisper of an apology for the civilizational annihilation language. This is the classic playbook: dismiss, attack the messenger, claim persecution, and never show weakness. In the past, this playbook has worked because the underlying charges were complex legal arguments about executive privilege or statutory interpretation, things that make the average voter's eyes glaze over. But the genocide framing shatters that shield. You cannot easily dismiss a charge of threatening genocide as a procedural disagreement. To dismiss it, you must argue one of two things. Either the words, "a whole civilization will die tonight," do not mean what every English speaker on the planet understands them to mean, or threatening the death of a civilization is perfectly acceptable behavior for a president of the United States. Neither of those arguments plays well outside the confines of a MAGA rally. Furthermore, his refusal to apologize, while politically necessary to maintain his never back down persona, actually serves as corroborating evidence for the impeachment article's core claim that his conduct is grossly incompatible with the office. A president who cannot recognize that threatening to erase a people from the map is wrong is, by definition, demonstrating the very incompatibility the articles allege. Can you believe the irony? His defense mechanism is feeding the prosecution's case. This is classic Trumpian jiu-jitsu turned against him. Now, let's dissect the actual legal architecture of these impeachment articles, because they are not just thrown together, they are surgically precise. The charge of inciting or threatening genocide is constructed around the exact verbiage of the Easter Sunday Post and its relationship to the Genocide Convention. The United States is a signatory to that convention. Under the Supremacy Clause of the Constitution, ratified treaties are the supreme law of the land. Threatening to wipe out a whole civilization maps with chilling accuracy onto the convention's definition of acts aimed at the destruction of a national or ethnic group. The charge is not that Trump committed the physical act of genocide. It is that he incited or threatened it. And Article 3 of that very same convention prohibits not just the act itself, but also conspiracy, incitement, attempt, and complicity. The drafters of these impeachment articles are not just throwing around a hot-button word. They are invoking a specific, binding legal framework that is part of American law. They are making a sophisticated legal argument that the president's tweet was not just unpresidential, it was a potential violation of a treaty obligation. This grounds the impeachment in international law in a way that demands to be taken seriously by legal scholars and not just political operatives. The second prong, abuse of war powers, connects these articles directly to the ongoing and bloody constitutional fight over who gets to decide when America goes to war. The military operations connected to the Iran situation were conducted without the explicit congressional authorization that the war powers resolution mandates. The unauthorized strikes that preceded the Easter Sunday threat are documented in the charge as part of a pattern. This article is arguing that the cumulative effect, the combination of unauthorized kinetic action plus the verbal threat of genocide, represents a fundamental departure from what the office of the presidency requires. It's an argument about the totality of the conduct. Let's zoom out and look at the political battlefield this creates, particularly the internal war raging inside the Democratic Party. This surprise filing didn't just open a front against Trump. It opened a front between the progressive wing and leadership. There are now 80 to 85 members demanding a floor vote on removal. Leadership is still running the math on whether a failed vote hurts more than suppressing the vote. This is the defining internal Democratic story of the moment. Here is the specific nightmare scenario for leadership. The base is screaming for a vote. The progressive icons are on television saying the House must vote. If leadership bottles this up in committee, they face a revolt from their left flank and accusations that they are complicit in covering up a threatened war crime. But if they allow the vote, they hand Trump a not guilty headline and give every Republican in a swing district a chance to stand with the president on a national security issue. There is no clean exit. The resolution of this internal knife fight will determine the tone and tenor of the Democratic campaign heading into the midterms. And the surprise timing was a masterstroke of legislative guerrilla warfare. When impeachment articles are expected, the opposition spins up the outrage machine, books the friendly media hits, and frames the debate before the papers are even filed. By dropping this as a surprise in the immediate aftermath of the Easter Sunday Post, the authors of the articles caught the administration flat-footed. They landed the charge when the memory of "a whole civilization will die" was still ringing in the public's ears, when the constituent outrage was at peak temperature, when 85 members were already in the yes column. The timing maximized the emotional and political impact. It put leadership in a box where delay becomes a story about cowardice. It forces the media to cover the substance of the genocide charge rather than the process of the filing. Now, let's talk about why the word genocide changes everything in the court of public opinion. Previous impeachment efforts in this term have been dense with constitutional law. They require explaining the emoluments clause, or the appointments clause, or the intricacies of the Impoundment Control Act. These are vital issues, but they are complicated. Genocide is not complicated. It is the ultimate evil. It is universally understood. It requires no legal degree to grasp the severity of the accusation. When House Democrats file articles accusing the president of inciting or threatening genocide, they have created a narrative that can be communicated in a single devastating sentence. The president threatened to kill a whole civilization. That's what genocide is, and we have formally charged him with it. That accessibility is a political superweapon. It bypasses the brain and goes straight to the gut. It takes the most extreme statement of Trump's second term and welds it to the most reviled category of crime in human history. And consider the 2026 implications. The articles are now chiseled into the congressional record. They are permanent. They are searchable. They will be the foundation of 1,000 campaign ads. Every Republican who votes against these articles, or even votes against bringing them to the floor, will have to answer for that vote in a general election. The argument is brutally simple. You voted to protect a man who threatened genocide and refused to apologize. That is the kind of attack ad that cuts through the noise, that breaks through the partisan silos, and that resonates in the suburban swing districts where control of the House will be decided. The moral clarity of the genocide charge makes the political argument virtually unassailable for the Democrats wielding it. Let's connect this back to the dam-breaking metaphor. For months, the tactical argument against impeachment was that a failed vote was worse than no vote. It was a cold, rational calculation. But the Easter Sunday Post changed the variables in the equation. It introduced a new cost, the cost of appearing complicit. For a Democratic member of Congress, the question is no longer, will a failed vote hurt us in November? The question is now, if we don't even try to impeach a president who threatened genocide, what do we tell our voters? That is a fundamentally different political calculation. The dam broke because the moral weight of the new evidence was too heavy for the old tactical dam to hold. The pressure from the base, combined with the sheer horror of the language, made the old strategy of cautious containment impossible. The genocide charge is the most serious single allegation ever leveled against Trump in a formal legislative setting. This is not hyperbole. Inciting or threatening genocide is an international law charge grounded in a ratified treaty. It is now part of the permanent historical and legal record of this presidency. Future historians, international tribunals, and legal scholars will have access to a formal congressional finding that a sitting U.S. president was formally accused of threatening genocide based on his own words. That record does not disappear if the vote fails. It is a stain that cannot be expunged. The scale of the removal bloc, 80 to 85 members, makes the internal Democratic debate unsustainable in its current form. When a super minority of the caucus wanted impeachment, leadership could manage them. When nearly half the caucus is demanding a floor vote on a genocide charge, the political cost of burying the articles in committee approaches the political cost of losing the vote. The optics of hiding a genocide impeachment are politically toxic for a party that needs its base to turn out in droves. Trump's response proves the limits of his deflection playbook. Calling a genocide charge ridiculous is not a legal defense, it's a confession of tone deafness. His refusal to apologize, while consistent with his brand, reinforces the article's claim that his conduct is incompatible with the office. The witch hunt framing collapses under the weight of a charge this specific and this morally repugnant. The surprise nature of this filing signals a new, more aggressive phase of the accountability campaign. The dam has broken. The internal constraints that kept the most aggressive options off the table have been washed away by the extremity of Trump's own language. Future provocations will now land in an environment where 85 members are already preloaded for removal. The baseline has shifted permanently toward aggressive action. So where do we go from here? 3 things to watch like a hawk. First, the leadership decision. Will they allow a floor vote, or will they try to smother this in committee? The reasoning they offer will tell you everything about who is actually driving the Democratic strategy right now. Second, watch the Republicans, particularly the ones in districts that Biden won. Their silence on the genocide charge is a political vulnerability. If even 1 or 2 break ranks to say the language was inappropriate, it's a crack in the dam on the other side of the aisle. Third, watch the ceasefire clock. The geopolitical situation in the region is a powder keg. Any further escalation will pour gasoline on these impeachment articles and make the pressure for a vote impossible to resist. Here is the absolute unvarnished bottom line. Donald Trump looked into the digital abyss and threatened that a whole civilization will die tonight. In response, House Democrats did not issue a press release. They filed a surprise impeachment article charging him with inciting genocide. 80 to 85 members are now on the record for removal. The dam of cautious political calculation has been shattered by the sheer weight of the president's own words. The genocide charge is now in the official congressional record, a permanent scar on the historical legacy of this administration. Trump's panic is visible in his inability to mount a coherent defense beyond calling it ridiculous. The articles are filed. The surprise attack has landed, and the question of whether leadership allows a floor vote is the next explosive decision point in the most serious congressional accountability crisis of this entire second term. Stay locked in, because when the geopolitical situation inevitably heats up again, the political and constitutional pressure around these genocide articles is going to become a supernova, forcing every single member of Congress to take a position they've spent months praying they could avoid. And those positions will be the defining issue when America votes.